Hello, everyone. It's Stephen Whiteside here from theuptrend.com with this weekend's edition of Protect Your Portfolio. Well, it's the first day of December, and I understand a lot of people got some snow over the past couple of days, and some people got a lot of snow. We haven't got any snow yet so far, so that could certainly change during the month of December. I remember you really need to drive defensively right now. You have to get used to driving in the snow, but so does everybody else. And that's what you need to be worried about it, not just yourself, but everybody else who's driving out there. We all need to get used to driving in the snow once again. Now, on Saturday morning, we posted over 32,000 new fresh charts. These guys look exhausted, and they were. Uh, in this presentation, we're going to do 50 to 60 charts. We're going to just skim off the top, look at the big picture, and keep you on the right side of the major market moves. We're certainly not driving down into every corner of the market. We want as many people as possible to benefit from an overall view of the market, and that's certainly what happens. If an ETF is going up, the majority of stocks in that ETF are also going up. Now, for the week, the TSX closed up at an new all-time high and closed up just under 1% on the week. We are trying to get to 39.06. That is certainly our next target to the upside. And if we can break that, then $40 would certainly be a big round number for the Canadian stock market. Looking at the SPY, a new all-time high there, up over 1% on the week, closed above 600, and we are still stuck to 600. So, yes, it's a new all-time high. We can cheer about that, but have we broken away from 600? No, we haven't. If we can do that, then 609.38 is our next target on the daily chart, and then after that, it's 625 on both the daily and the weekly chart. So there's certainly could be legitimate targets to the upside, especially if we're going to have a rip-roaring Christmas rally in December. Now, looking at the seasonality chart for the S&P 500, you can see last week we were here, and now we're here. And there's a little dip on the first couple of days of December. There could be some profit taking after last week's nice move up, but it doesn't end up being too. Typically, it's not an aggressive sell-off. On some years, we do get a major sell-off in December for tax loss selling, but there's really not much to sell in 2024. Most things are positive on the year, so I'm not sure how much tax loss selling we're going to get in 2024. Looking at the VIX, the VIX made a new closing low for this move on Friday, and we're going to remain long-term bullish on the market as long as the VIX does not close above 2055 this coming Friday. On a daily basis, if you're watching the market on Monday, if we were to close above 1645, that would certainly change the tone of the market on a short-term basis. And of course, if that doesn't happen on Monday, that upper channel line is going to continue to move lower daily. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we had a bearish reversal week, and we used the IWM as our example. And of course, that signal stays in place until we close above it. And if it was a bullish reversal signal, that signal would stay in place until we close below it. So what's happened? Well, 2 weeks have passed, and yes, we moved up. This week, we actually closed up 1.3%, 1.3%. We're still closing at the high from a couple of weeks ago, so we really haven't broken out above that high. So that bearish reversal signal is still in play. Now, looking at a bearish reversal signal from this week, the Dow Diamonds gave one on Wednesday, and you can see we made a new high and then pulled back, closed lower on the day. So that was the reversal signal. What didn't happen? Well, we didn't close below the previous day's low, so I wasn't too worried about it. We need to either confirm it or to move on. Now, we still haven't nullified that signal because on Friday we closed at Wednesday's high. So we did not break out and close above Wednesday's high. We closed at Wednesday's high. So that signal is still in play, still a weak signal, just something to keep in the back of your mind, as was the signal from a couple of weeks ago for the IWM. Now, with the month of November over, I thought we'd take a review of where we are year to date. So what's working in 2024? Well, the S&P 500 is up over 25%. The NASDAQ 100 is up just under 25%, and the TSX is up over 21% for the year. Now, with what's happening in the world of commodities right now, it's hard to believe the TSX is up over 20%, but it has a lot to do with the financial sector. Now, when it comes to sector performance, the biggest winner this year is the Magnificent Seven ETF, up over 54%. Now, you can see there's not much on this monthly chart. There's not enough historical data. We've got early warning right side buy signal there, and that's about it for this particular ETF. And there's a couple more that look like that. But after the Magnificent Seven, it's the broker dealers up over 41%, followed by semiconductors. And depending on which ETF you're looking at, this is the SMH, and it's up over 38% year to date. U.S. insurance companies are up over 37%, and then U.S. financials are up 36.54% for the year. So a lot of strength in the financial sectors on both sides of the border in 2024. Now, in Canada, the biggest winner is the information technology sector, up over 36% on the year. A lot of it has to do with Shopify, which is a late player in the game. It's currently up nearly 57% for the year. A lot of that came in the last month, which was up over 48% for the month of November. Then Constellation Software up 44% and change. But if you move away from the TSX 60 to the TSX, the big technology winner on the TSX itself is Celestica, up over 200% for the year. Now, another big winner is First Quantum. And, looking at First Quantum, it had a terrible 2023, so it's still coming off that. It is still on a monthly sell signal. That hasn't changed, even though it's up 76% and change for the year. Of course, the first thing I see when I look at this chart is lower highs, lower lows, and we're still treading water here in the channel. So, yes, it's up over 76%, but not something that would catch my attention. Then looking at the U.S. market, the big winner on the S&P 500 is Vistra Energy, up over 300% for the year, followed by Palantir, which is a stock I know a lot of people are watching, up over 290%. And then the big bear, the big elephant in the room is NVIDIA, up 179.17% year to date. And of course, NVIDIA is now in the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the S&P 500. Now, after NVIDIA on the Dow, it's actually Walmart, up over 76%. So, raising all their prices across the board has been very profitable for both them and their stock. So that one's looking pretty good. Now, moving on to what's not working in 2024. Well, when we look at the sectors, that's a very small list, just two sectors. U.S. marijuana stocks are down over 20%, and at the same time, Canadian marijuana stocks are up over 8%, nearly 9% for the year. At the same time, Canadian REITs are just about unchanged on the year. So U.S. marijuana stocks, Canadian REITs, those are the big losers for 2024 so far. Now, when we look at the marijuana stocks, it's really important to focus on the right-hand side of the screen. When we look at the weekly flypaper channel chart for the MJ ETF, I want you to just bite this chunk right here. If you want to play the marijuana sector, this is your world right here. Everything before that is totally irrelevant. It's not there. It's there for your entertainment, but certainly it's not to be used as a goal or a guide or anything. We've been under the flypaper channel for over a year now, and so any trade that we get is up to the flypaper channel. When we look at this weekly price target chart, this is your playing field, and we're getting down to the bottom of the projected range at the moment. But, from 237, if we went up 27 cents, that would be a 10% gain, and that would just take us up, wouldn't even take us up the first two lines. So, that's a trade. And then if you look from 273 up to 469, if we ran back to those previous highs, which is certainly doable, that's a 71% gain. So within this smaller time frame, there's opportunities to make money, but you need to have realistic expectations. These stocks are not going back to where they were before anytime soon. So just keep your expectations realistic. There's trades to be had here. There'll be good days and bad days. And as long as you're not expecting this particular ETF to go to 10, 20, 30 bucks, you'll do just quite well. Now, the biggest loser on the TSX is BCE, down over 27%. OpenText, so not all technology stocks are doing well in 2024, down over 23%. And then Rogers, so Bell Rogers down just under 20% for the year so far. They're the real drag on the TSX. Looking at the composite, it's SSR Mining, which is down over 42%. So it's been a monthly downtrend for several years now. So, nobody is really expecting much from that stock. And then Parex is down over 40%. So no change in trend there. Even though it was up over 15% for the week, it's still down 40% year to date. In the US, on the Dow, we're looking at Boeing down over 40%, followed by Nike down over 27% for the year. Looking at the NASDAQ, it's Moderna down over 56% so far in 2024. And of course, the first thing I see is we just put in another lower low. So lower high, lower low. That pattern is not changing at the moment. Let's finish off today's presentation, getting back to weekly charts and looking at the commodity ETFs. And I have to say, when I go through these ETFs and think about how the Canadian stock market is doing and how these particular ETFs are doing, I'm quite shocked. I could never imagine that the TSX would be making new all-time highs with all of these commodity stocks just floundering at the moment. Let's start off looking at the USO. Crude oil was down over 3.5% on the week, having an inside week, so no change in trend there. No change in trend for gasoline, down nearly 4.5% on the week. And of course, that's good for consumers, might not be good for energy companies. Natural gas was up just under 1% on the week. Of course, that's nothing for natural gas. So we're struggling here to get back on a weekly buy signal, and we've got an open gap to deal with. And the high from a few weeks ago, that would be nice if we could take that out. Then looking at energy stocks on the TSX, we were down over 3%. No change in trend, but did we just put in another lower high? We were trying to get to 1875 reverse. Support is at 1797. We closed at 1799. And you can see 2 lines down takes us down to 1641. Then looking at the U.S. market, do we just put in a lower high? Well, it's not conclusive yet, but we were down 1.79% on the week. We were reaching for 100. So far, we haven't been able to get there. Looking at the world of copper, copper was up slightly on the week. Actually put in, I believe, was 1 penny lower on the week, so not an inside week for copper. Copper miners, on the other hand, were up slightly on the week, having an inside week. No change there. It was an inside week for the GLD, down on the week. The price of gold in dollars was down over $56, so no change in trend there. And then no change in trend for gold stocks in New York, inside week. Gold stocks in Toronto had an inside week, and the junior gold miners, they were down just over 1/3% on the week. Moving on to the shiny world of silver, we were down just under 2%, while silver stocks were up a little over 0.75%, still on a weekly sell signal. No change in trend for silver miners or for the junior miners. So the big cap silver miners were up nearly a little over 0.75%, while the junior miners were down 1.74%. So a little divergence there. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover in today's presentation. Things are looking pretty good. We're lining up for a Christmas rally. Does that mean every day between now and the end of the year is going to be up? No, it doesn't. Do we have a reason to do a lot of tax loss selling in 2024? No, we don't. So we'll just have to watch and see how the market reacts to day-to-day news. Now, I need your help. I need you to cover for me. I have missed my last 2 blood donor appointments. The first one, I was sick. The second and maybe the third one are going to be because I'm on a prescription that they won't take donations from people who have this prescription. So I'm on this prescription till December 23rd, and then we're going to review and see what happens next. But yeah, I'm screwing up right now. I'm behind 2 donations, and I need your help. I need you to cover for me, and I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. That would be wonderful, and it would be something you could check off your to-do list for 2024 before the year ends. Okay, folks, thank you very much for your time and attention. Next time you'll hear my voice is on Monday morning, and at that time we'll just run through the most actively traded stocks from Friday's trading action.